So I'll admit, I read Wired magazine every so often. I get their actual paper magazine in the mail, and I came across this article. I understand they're left leaning, but every so often they'll write something political about like a cultural article, and it's just total garbage. And this is one of those articles where I have to say the person writing this article is a bad journalist or didn't know what they're talking about, because whether it was written with malice or not, it's still their fault because I have to hold them to the higher standard, and they got this wrong. So we'll go through the article and show exactly why I think that way. And to start off, we can start over with the title, which is 5 of the top far-right figures are British, we're world leaders in hate. So far right, Tom, that's the biggest thing that stands out right there, far right. And I have to, whenever someone says far right, I have to be extremely skeptical because, again, what is far right? Like, is Mitt Romney far right? Is Rush Limbaugh far right? Is Hitler far right? That last one, I would say yes. Those first two, not so much. Far right generally means alt-right or white nationalist or even like white supremacist or unironic fascist. Those people we can all kind of group together in what I think people think of when they think far right. I don't think that's an unfair characterization. But when it comes to far right, I've even heard some people use like anarcho-capitalist as far right, because I understand anarcho-capitalist is, I consider right-wing, and it is a very extreme philosophy, but I don't consider extreme a bad thing in that regard. So if the far right term just isn't very helpful, it just doesn't apply very well, and generally the people that use the term far right are applying it too broadly. So that's something we have to be worrying about. But then they follow up with we are world leaders in hate. So is the far right hateful? Well, I can think of many ideological groups and many people in the far right who are indeed very hateful, who do hate innocent people and have a lot of hatred towards people that I think have done nothing wrong. Like, that is true. There are a lot of people in the far right that are that. But then what they do is they say we're world leaders in hate because 5 of the top far right figures are British. So they're saying if you are far right, you are hateful. Which, as they're using the term here, I mean we'll see in a second as we go through the article, because I know I've skimmed it already. They point out several people who they lump in as far right, who are not far right, and who are anything like nowhere even near close to being hateful. So that's interesting how right off the bat they're like, oh, we're world leaders in hate because of this arbitrary list of far-right people. So what we got to do here is to verify this article as true. If this article is true or not, it has to prove that the 5 of the top far-right figures, that these 5 people are hateful. That is what they have to prove here. And, like, spoiler alert here, they don't prove that. Britain dominates the top 10 list of leading far-right influencers, according to a new report by Hope Not Hate, which is, to be honest, like a pretty left-leaning organization so far that, not to be hypocritical here, but I would say legitimately far left. Far left is implying like globalists, socialists, communists, along those lines. Like, that is how I would define far left. So when I call Hope Not Hate far left, that is what I'm referring to. With much of their success being driven by followers outside the UK. This is the article here. 5 of the world's top 10 far-right activists on the internet are British, a new report into online extremism has found. Now, I've looked at this report. It is very long. It goes very in-depth, and it talks about lots of legitimately, like, actual Nazi people. It does do, it goes so far in depth that I'm not gonna, it's gonna take me weeks to research this, to go through this whole thing and verify it bit by bit. But honestly, I hate to say it, but if there was good research in there, we'll have to toss out the report because I found so much stuff on there that I could verify as false that we'll have to dismiss it because, again, they lump so many people that are kind of like center-right into far-right. Like, if you wanted to call it a report on the right wing, that would be kind of fair, but they don't. They call it far-right, and I have to wonder, like, again, how far is far-right? Because I see people that are, like, right along the centrist line being referred to as far-right. So, again, every time you see far-right here, replace it with right wing. So that seems to be what the article has done here. But to name a few people, Milo Yiannopoulos, Paul Joseph Watson, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson, Katie Hopkins, and Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad, are all British-born and among the 10 most influential far-right activists online. So these are very influential right-wing activists. Would I call them far-right? No. Milo, certainly right-wing. The interesting thing is I don't know if I'd really call him far-right because his lifestyle kind of goes against the far-right. And I've seen a lot of, like, actual far right people, a lot of like alt right people seem to hate on Milo pretty much. So I don't know if you could really consider him that. Paul Joseph Watson, again, depends what you mean by far right. The article or the report itself referred to, like, they had a section on conspiracy theorists. Like, to be a conspiracy theorist is to be far right, and I disagree with that. Are they disproportionately right wing? Honestly, I can't even say that because I know of too many left wing conspiracy theorists, like the Russiagate one, for example, to really say whether or not conspiracy theory is right wing. So, Paul Joseph Watson, is he a conspiracy theorist? He does believe certain. He does have theories on certain conspiracies, yes. But to lump him in as the far right category, I don't think that. As he has said multiple times, the far right tends to dislike him. They tend to hate him. And one of the biggest reasons they lump Paul Joseph Watson into the far right is because of his ties to InfoWars. And believe me, I don't think InfoWars is far right. Are they conspiracy theorists? Sure. I would not describe them as far right, but considering if you look through, actually, the YouTube comments, YouTube deleted their whole channel, so you can't verify this anymore. But I would remember going through some of the old Alex Jones shows on YouTube, and every time every so often, I would just see all of these people who were legitimately alt-right in that attack Alex Jones because he was not right-wing enough for them. So I'm gonna say InfoWars isn't far right if they're applying this definition, the standard definition that most people assume. So right now we're 0 for 2 right now. Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson. Is he far right? I would say no. Is he a bit radical in maybe his way of going about things? I would certainly say that. And he's even written in his book that maybe my tactics haven't exactly been the best. And yeah, if I had one major criticism of Tommy Robinson, it would be more of his ways of going about things, something that he even agrees with. Maybe not the best at certain times. But overall, is he far right? No. Actually, I find that I'm typically center right, and as I go through what he believes, it's pretty similar to what I believe. He's just more on the ground, if that makes sense, more on the streets and actually doing activism, and I greatly respect that. But yeah, when it comes to his actual beliefs, I don't see any evidence of him being far right. Tommy Robinson is the one person that is probably called far right the most. That is not true. And again, you have to separate his actions versus his beliefs. It's can you disagree with certain acts that he certain? I'm not disagreeing with the way he does it as a whole, because I gotta admit, I'm sitting here behind a computer screen and he's out there actually doing stuff, so I have to respect that. But that's how people tend to go after him, because he's a lot more of holding rallies and that, and sometimes finds himself in trouble. But after reading his book and that, I can't really blame him for a lot of the stuff he does, and he seems to be an all-around nice dude. I know a few people that know him, and they've all said yeah, he's a really nice dude. So when it comes to his actual beliefs from the interviews I've seen, is he far right? No. So we're 0 for 3 right now. Katie Hopkins, honestly, I don't know enough about Katie Hopkins. She seems like basically another, a female Milo Yiannopoulos. I don't know enough about her to say if she's far right or not, but I have not seen any evidence of that. I have never heard of anyone that I respect, whose opinion I can trust, refer to as far right. So we are at possibly true, possibly not. But I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and say no, probably not. 0 for 4 maybe. And Carl Benjamin, who is probably the most centrist person on this list, who is nowhere even close to far right, who is actually to the left of me, I would say. And I consider myself center right, so I would put him pretty much smack dab in the center. That is where the political spectrum puts him. The politicalcompass.org test puts him right in the center. So right now we are 0 for 5, maybe 1 for 4, but most likely 0 for 5 in terms of far right extremists. Because I suppose one thing you have to take into account is when people say the term far right, they imply extreme. And none of these people, I would say, are very extreme in their ideology, extreme in their right-wing ideology. I would disagree with that assessment. So they're 0 for 5 right now. In terms of far right, they just listed 5 people that they're going to focus on. None of these people are far right. And the interesting thing is, the far right tends to hate and dislike a lot of these people. Which especially Carl Benjamin, for one, is known for being disliked and pretty much hated by the far right. So what I find interesting here is Wired magazine, instead of actually reporting on the far right, they decided to slander and attack the people that are currently fighting and opposing the far right. So I just find that rather interesting that Wired seems to be if anything, like promoting the actual far right here, or if anything, like helping the actual far right by going after people that are more center right and like moderately centrist, or moderately right wing. So of course, like that's something to keep in mind whenever you attack someone that is like center right and you accuse them of being far right. What you are doing is strengthening the actual far right. So the findings come from a report by the political action group Hope Not Hate. Again, I'll leave a link to that report in the description and the article. There's the link right here. I'll leave a link to that, but it goes very in depth. Some of this is probably true, but I don't know enough to verify it. But the parts that I could verify as true for myself were false. So, like on these four of these 5 people, I went through their summaries, and it's like, yeah, those were all hit pieces, and not really exactly anything close to true. Like I failed to see what the purpose of that report was. The report surveys the far-right's online elements, focusing in particular on the personalities who leverage their large social media presence to agitate and direct global swarms of followers. The report finds a growth in traffic to far-right websites and in followers of far-right social media accounts. It's important not to see this statistic as a skyrocketing in new British... Maybe this is just how the British talk, and it's not bad grammar, but is a skyrocketing... See the statistic as a skyrocket in new British far-right figures was the original term, but they added ing to the end. I want to say that's bad grammar, but again, it's British, so maybe that's just how they talk. But I've never heard that before. And people that watch my channel know that I will point out bad grammar because that means you don't care enough about what you're writing to really fact-check it. Not fact-check it, but to read over it once and make sure you're actually writing like good grammar in that. A senior researcher at Hope Not Hate who works on this report. He points out that several big American names, InfoWars' Alex Jones most notably, dropped off the list after being banned by YouTube and other platforms last year. Again, they're considering Alex Jones as far right. And again, it's so murky because is Alex Jones extremist in his views? Sure. Like, I would say he's very extreme in his views. But when people think of far right, they think of like alt-right. They think of sympathizing with white nationalists and that doesn't seem to be what Alex Jones is. Again, I see when I think of like what the far right views of Alex Jones, they don't like him. Like the far right does not like Alex Jones very much because Alex Jones is very pro-Israel and is actually like that's the biggest thing, the biggest criticism I see of them. The far right will even at times criticize Donald Trump for like they think he is controlled by Jews, and Alex Jones is very pro Donald Trump. I can't help but point that out. So again, that's another one on the list. They're 0 for 6 right now. Nonetheless, he says these figures' Britishness is still relevant. Beyond the fact that many of them adopted social media very early and are sophisticated in their use of it, they speak English and can be understood by like-minded activists across the whole of Europe. Bharath Ganesh, a researcher at the Oxford Internet Institute and an expert in online extremism, says that while the list is accurate, is he an expert in online extremism if he says the list is accurate? Or maybe they're taking his statement on accuracy out of context. Who knows? But either way, it's something else I can criticize about this article. Another statement. It does skew towards Anglophone influencers. He also just suggested that things would look different if the top 10 focused on figures who are popular only in the U.S. I think Milo would be on there, Paul Joseph Watson would be there, Tommy Robinson would be there, but I do think that some of the other names like Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad would drop out. I don't know how accurate that last thing is, but yes, I agree for the most part that their audiences are largely American. For Ganesh, the first element that explains the high number of Brits on the list is obvious, namely that both the US and the UK are countries with high levels of penetration on social media, particularly Twitter. Because of this, he says, I think there has been a lot of these people who see it as a kind of opportunity. I could become an influencer on Twitter around these far-right issues. Again, they call them far-right issues, which is a way of saying, if you agree with me, if you agree with the far-right on this issue, you are also far-right. And if the far-right agrees or believes this certain, like, finds this issue important, it is automatically bad. It's like, I find that when it comes to the actual legitimate far-right, there are a lot of issues that they see as concerning that I also see as concerning. There are a lot of things we overlap on. It's just that there's also significant things that we disagree on, which is why you can't just group them in like that. It's the whole guilt by association thing of, if you take a mainstream opinion that the alt-right agrees with, all of a sudden all of the people that share that opinion are far right. The other less obvious factor, says Ganesh, is that the nature of the global dialogue between these figures drives their popularity. Exclude Milo from this, but Paul Joseph Watson and Tommy Robinson and Katie Hopkins, they're particularly useful for the far right. Again, this comes down to the usefulness thing of like, oh, if you are not far right, but you are right wing and you're popular, that means that you're leading people into the far right. And of course, that's, again, it's just guilt by association. It's the kind of thing of, oh, if you are a centrist and you are appealing and right wing people watch your content and you're a centrist, did you know that you're moving them towards the left? You're making them sympathize with left wing point. Like, can I call Tim Pool someone that is useful for the far left because he is left wing and the right wing likes him? Like, it's all guilt by association stuff, which is just it's crummy tactics. It's not nothing legitimate. It's not a legitimate argument. They translate this idea about cultural decline and attacks on the West and the UK from foreigners, primarily Muslims, into something for American audiences as well. Yes, that view there is a very, it's something that is very common. Centrists believe this, right-wingers believe this, and the far right, the actual far right, also believe this. This does not make anyone that believes this far right. It does not make it a far right conspiracy theory if it's a mainstream opinion. They are trying to bridge some of the distance. Again, trying implies intent, that they are trying to bridge that gap, that they are actually trying to make these far-right ideas more understandable. That implies that they're working with the far right, which, again, I see no evidence of that. Cite your source, and they haven't done that. These narratives that there are, for instance, Muslim-controlled no-go zones in Birmingham. I'm not British, so I can't confirm that, honestly. I don't know if that's true or not. Confirm the worldview of a sympathetic foreign audience and drive funding and influence. American think tanks such as the Middle East Forum have given money to Tommy Robinson. In the UK, the far right tends to focus on the city of Gothenburg in Sweden, which has a relatively high Muslim population, Ganesh explains. They talk about how culture is being erased and how white people there are under threat, and they use that as an example of how this is going to come to Britain. That's what these influencers do, but for American audiences. Honestly, I kind of agree with that statement. When it comes to are white people under threat, when the alt-right brings up all these statistics, it's like, yeah, they make a valid point. They're not wrong in that respect. I don't think they're wrong there. It's just that my solution and their solution is a bit different. But I do think, again, to say white people are under threat has become more of a mainstream view. That used to be like a fringe alt-right view, and I don't think that's because it's just become a more popular view. I think, or it's not just because that view is spreading. I think it's because it's becoming more justified. The view itself is actually becoming more justified because, as we've seen in countries like the UK, government organizations are saying white people need not apply. They are actually saying, if you are a white person, we do not want you to apply for this job. If you are a white person, we will turn you down. But that seems to be the whole, when people say white people are under threat, yeah, I can kind of sympathize with that because I can see that argument and they're not wrong. When a company can actually come out and say, yeah, we will not hire members of this race, and that's not illegal. Nobody's challenging that. Maybe people are challenging that in court, but I haven't seen anything about victories in that regard. This collaboration extends to whole platforms. Again, they call it a collaboration, and I don't think that's true. Where's your evidence? He uses the example of Gab.ai, a free speech absolutist Twitter-like platform popular with the far right, as an example of what he calls alt tech. Now, this is interesting because this statement here is actually fair. This statement is actually correct. I have to question the guilt by association thing, but it's actually correct because they didn't say I actually kind of want to give them a little bit of credit where credit is due because they didn't call Gab.ai far right. They actually said a free speech absolutist Twitter-like platform, which is a correct statement. Is it popular with the far right? Yes. As an example of what he calls alt tech. That was actually a kind of fair statement there. Again, I know they're trying to use a guilt by association thing with, it's popular with the far right, therefore it's bad, is what they're trying to imply. So they lose points there. But I found that interesting how this is probably the first paragraph in this whole article where everything they said was actually technically correct. Right after, at the end of 2017, is this British? Is this just Brit speak or is this bad grammar? I can't tell. When Twitter was shutting down a lot of alt-right accounts, Gab started reaching out to people in the UK, which had been taken down, like Britain First, and then set up a whole channel called British Family. The aim, he says, was to build these linkages between the US and the UK to secure funding and secure alliances. I don't see how that's true. Maybe it is, but I have seen no evidence of that. From what I know about Gab and all that, I don't see this as some great conspiracy where the far right and the alt right and the centrists and the center right people are all working together to make like fascism more palatable. Like I see no evidence of that at all. Well, if anything, I just see lots of fighting back and forth between the center right and the far right. It's just that they happen to overlap on a few issues. And sure, when I was reading, if you ever read some of the old like libertarian magazines from the 80s, they will talk about working with the New Left, which were pretty dang communist and socialist at that time. They were working with the far left because they overlapped on a few issues. They were working with the far left on those specific issues, something that I don't see an issue with. And it's like, okay, if you find an overlap on a certain topic, you kind of want to associate with the other ideologies that agree with you on that topic. You can work together on that one issue. That doesn't mean that you endorse everything they say, or that you're collaborating as some evil organization to normalize like alt-right views or anything. It's just like, yeah, certain people like will talk to each other sometimes and will share common views and they will work together on those views. But to say that it's like building linkages between the US and the UK, to secure funding and secure audiences, I don't see that. I don't see that as being true. Mulhall agrees. He points out that paradoxically for nationalists, these groups strive to extend their global reach. The Free Tommy Robinson March was timed to coincide with Donald Trump's visit to the UK in July. The LFS staking out politicians in Westminster took their name from France's Gilets Jaunes. I can't pronounce French words at all, but I'm going to say that's Gilets Jaunes. I don't know. The idea of a global cultural conflict makes their beliefs more attractive. Well, yes, this part is all true. Like, there was a collaboration in that part to make the Free Tommy March to coincide with Donald Trump's visit to the UK. Yes, I'm aware of the people that set that up, and that is what happened. That's not sinister. That's not evil or anything. That's not far right. Like, I don't think Free Tommy Robinson is far right. It's something that, again, the alt-right were no doubt supportive of Free Tommy Robinson, but that doesn't make it a far-right march or anything like that they're trying to imply. In North America, because of their view of Britain, they see someone like Tommy Robinson as a soldier on the front line in a war against Muslims and a clash of civilizations. They want to hear that Europe is at war, Mulhall says. Looking forward to 2019, the report notes that there has been some pushback against these figures. Social media companies, for instance, are increasingly removing leading far-right figures from these platforms, but these groups are often managed to recover from these setbacks, something like Turning Point UK. It seems to be a disaster at launch, but these groups often come back and exert influence. It's a pattern, Ganesh says. Again, Turning Point UK, I hear they're just starting to set that up. I can't imagine how that's far-right. Like, Turning Point USA is very, like, establishment Republic, not even establishment, sorry, but like Trump conservative Republican. It's it's not very like it's not far right. It's just more mainstream like conservatism. I don't see how you can fairly call Turning Point USA and therefore Turning Point UK far right unless you're going to call the entire right wing far right. The question I would have for this author is, tell me some right wing views that are not far right. Because again, when you're going to put Carl Benjamin in the far right group, it's like, what isn't far right now? When you're putting centrists in the far right category, define for me right wing but not far right. Are you going to tell me that like Norway is considered right wing or Sweden is considered right wing? Like, I don't understand what they're putting there. Like, apparently I am far right and I consider myself pretty center right here. But yeah, that's the end of the article here. Of course, I had to keep ads on because they have the paywall. But yeah, that's pretty much the article, and hopefully that makes sense as to why it's wrong. In other words, again, when someone says far right, you have to kind of dismiss them, because it seems that the only people that actually say far right are left-wing enough that pretty much if you're a centrist or to the right, more to the right than a centrist, you are far right. Which is, and it's all, again, misunderstanding of, are these people working together? Like, can I work together? Like, can I support a movement that a white nationalist also supports and be considered to be colluding or collaborating together? Like working together to push the far right? No. No, it's like I tweeted out, I was one of the millions of people that tweeted out hashtag Free Tommy on my Twitter account. Does that make me far right? Does that make me collaborating with the far right? It doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, it's. I'm actually surprised they didn't put Count Dankula here, because I did see Count Dankula was included in the actual in the report on the far right. But yeah, it's just all guilt by association stuff. It's a report on, at this point, far right means right wing. And I understand that I'm American, so to me, like the centrist, or to what a centrist is in America is different than what a centrist is in the UK. I get that we are more right wing than the UK, but not enough that you can pick 5 people. And again, I can't say much about I was about to say Haiti Hopkins. Katie Hopkins. I don't know much about her, but these 4 people I can say for sure are not far right. And Katie Hopkins probably isn't. But yeah, that's pretty much the point here I wanted to get across. I wanted to go through and say why this article is flawed, and hopefully people that would have originally believed this article will watch this and understand. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and if you see anything wrong with what I said. Tell me where you disagree and why, and I'll be sure to respond. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more. Maybe share this on social media and tweet at Wired. That would be interesting to see if I could get an actual response. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comment section, and thanks for watching.